The wind sang a hollow tune through the stone peaks of Durban, a melody Daniel had known since birth. From his perch on the high watch, he could see the entire valley, the terraced farms, the winding river like a silver thread, and the sturdy, ancient halls of his people, the stone hands. His hands, already calloused from years of training, gripped the cold granite. He was a warrior of Durban, a title earned not given, and with it came a weight he was still learning to carry. His motivation was simple, pure. The laughter of children in the lower courtyards, the wisdom in his grandfather's eyes, the scent of fresh forge work. It was a life worth more than his own. Below, the clan went about its evening rituals, unaware of the dark thoughts that clouded their sentinel's mind. Rumors had reached them, whispers from traders of a shadow falling across the eastern passes. The Scourge, a relentless enemy who consumed lands and left only ash. Daniel felt no fear for himself, but a deep, chilling dread for the vulnerable world below. This was the first step of his personal growth, the quiet understanding that strength was not for boasting, but for shielding. He looked at his home, his heart swelling with a fierce, protective love, and knew that this peace was the very reason for his determination. His legacy would not be one of seeking glory, but of ensuring these echoes of life continued to ring from the mountains. The great hall was a cavern of warmth and noise, the fire pit throwing dancing shadows on tapestries depicting heroes of old. At its head sat Thorn Stonehand, Daniel's grandfather and the clan chief, his face a roadmap of a long life of leadership and conflict. The jovial mood of the feast had sobered as the scout, mud-spattered and breathless, delivered his report. The Scourge was not a rumor. They had breached the eastern defenses. The village of Dublin was gone. A silence fell, heavy and thick as winter snow. Daniel watched his grandfather's face, seeing not fear, but a profound, weary resolve. Thorn stood, and the hall held its breath. They come for the heart of Durban. His voice, though aged, filled the space with undeniable authority. They come for our home, but they forget who we are. We are the children of the mountain. Our walls are stone, and our wills are iron. A roar of approval answered him, a sound of defiant bravery. Daniel felt the sound vibrate in his own chest. This was the mindset of his people, unbreakable resilience. Thorn's eyes met Daniel's across the hall, and in that look was a question, a passing of the torch. The time for watching was over. The battle for their very existence was now upon them, and honor demanded they meet it head-on. The following days were a whirlwind of grim preparation. The idyllic peace of the valley was replaced by the relentless rhythm of war. Daniel worked alongside seasoned veterans, his youthful energy focused by their grim experience. He hauled stone to reinforce the gates, his muscles burning with a new purpose. At the forge, he sharpened swords, the shriek of metal on stone a grim anthem. This was not the glorious adventure from the songs. It was hard, dirty, and terrifying work. Every face he saw, from the oldest blacksmith to the youngest child carrying water, was etched with the same grim understanding. Sacrifice was imminent. During a brief respite, Daniel found his grandfather in the armory, slowly polishing an ancient, scarred shield. "You wonder if you are ready," Thorn said, not looking up. It was not a question. Daniel nodded, unable to find words for the storm of doubt within him. Thorn placed a hand on the shield. "This belonged to my father. He held the pass at Grief's End with 3 others against 100, so that our clan could escape. Courage is not the absence of fear, grandson. It is the decision that something else is more important than that fear." This moment of mentorship was a crucial step in Daniel's self-improvement, transforming abstract duty into tangible conviction. The obstacle was not just the enemy at the gate, but the fear in his own heart. The first wave of the Scourge hit the outer walls at dawn. It was not a battle. It was a storm. Dark, twisted figures swarmed the mountainsides, clattering against the stone defenses like a tide of malice. Daniel stood shoulder to shoulder with his kin, his shield locked with theirs, forming an unbreakable wall of steel and resolve. The air filled with the deafening cacophony of war cries, clashing metal, and the terrible sounds of impact. His world shrank to the few feet in front of him, to the rhythm of thrust and parry. This was the reality of conflict. Chaotic, brutal and visceral. An explosion of dark energy shattered a section of the wall to their left. The line buckled, and a wedge of enemy soldiers poured through, heading straight for the inner gate mechanism. Without a second thought, Daniel broke from the formation. "Hold the line," he roared, his voice sounding older than his years. He threw himself into the breach, his sword a blur. This was not a calculated act of heroism, but an instinctual one. He was a dam against the flood, buying precious seconds for reinforcements to plug the gap. In that moment, overcoming obstacles was a physical, bloody act. He fought not for glory, but for the lives of the families huddled in the great hall behind him. When the first assault was finally repelled, a weary silence descended, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. Daniel leaned heavily on his sword, his body aching, his armor stained. He had survived his first true test, but the cost was etched all around him. He saw the faces of those who would not rise again, elders who had taught him, friends he had grown up with. The price of their resilience was unimaginably high. A deep, cold anger began to replace his fear, hardening his determination into something steely and absolute. As he helped carry the wounded to the healers, he saw the effect of their stand. The people, though terrified, looked upon the warriors with a fierce, grateful pride. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. It had given them hope. An old woman pressed a water skin into his hands, her eyes bright with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That simple gratitude was more inspirational than any war cry. It solidified his motivation. He was not just a fighter, he was a protector. This personal growth was painful, forged in the crucible of loss, but it was the true mark of a warrior who understood the weight of his duty and the legacy he was now sworn to defend. Thorn summoned Daniel to the High Council chamber, now a makeshift war room. Maps were strewn across the table, weighted down by daggers and cups. The old chief's face was grim. "They test our strength, but their main force still gathers in the East Pass," he said, his finger tracing a route on the parchment. "We cannot withstand a full siege for long. Our walls are strong, but our stores are not infinite." The other captains argued strategy, voices tense with desperation. Some advocated for a full retreat into the deepest mountain holds, a strategy of survival but abandonment of their home. Daniel, listening quietly, felt a plan form in his mind, a dangerous, near-suicidal one. "They expect us to hide behind our walls," he said, his voice cutting through the debate. All eyes turned to him. "We must take the fight to them, not the whole host. A small group. We slip out, navigate the serpent's path, and strike at their command in the pass. Create chaos, break their siege before it truly begins." The room fell silent. The serpent's path was a treacherous, near-mythical route, and the mission was a desperate gamble. It was a testament to his emerging leadership that the seasoned warriors considered his words not as the folly of youth, but as the only path to overcoming this obstacle. It was a plan built on bravery and the ultimate sacrifice. Volunteers were called for the desperate mission, and to Daniel S.O., every able-bodied warrior stepped forward. This was the true strength of Durban, not in its stone walls, but in the hearts of its people. Thorn selected a dozen of the most skilled and stealthy, a mix of grizzled scouts and young, fierce fighters like Daniel. Their farewells were quiet, solemn affairs. There were no grand speeches, only tight embraces and whispered promises to return. Daniel stood before his grandfather, who placed the ancient, polished shield into his hands. "A piece of home to guard your back," Thorn said, his voice thick. "Lead them well, and come home." Under the cover of a moonless night, the small band slipped through a hidden sally port and melted into the shadows of the mountain. The adventure before them was one of sheer terror and grim purpose. Every shadow seemed to move, every loose stone sounded like a landslide. Daniel, setting a steady, silent pace, felt the immense weight of leadership settle on his shoulders. These lives were his responsibility. His mindset shifted from follower to commander, every sense heightened, every decision critical. Their determination was a silent pact between them, a shared understanding of the sacrifice they were all prepared to make for the greater good of their clan. The serpent's path was a nightmare of crumbling ledges and dizzying drops. They moved like ghosts, ropes and pitons their only allies against the uncaring mountain. The physical exertion was immense, a constant test of their resilience. One misstep meant a fall into oblivion. Daniel's hands were raw, his muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed onward, setting an inspirational example of endurance for the others. He offered a hand to those who struggled, shared his water, and ensured no one was left behind. This was leadership in action, shared burden and unwavering support. During a rest on a narrow ledge, an older scout named Bryn spoke to him quietly. "Your father would be proud," she said, her eyes scanning the dark valleys below. He had the same fire, the same stubbornness to do what is right, no matter the cost. Daniel rarely spoke of his father, a warrior who had fallen in a border skirmish years ago. The words struck a deep chord within him. This mission was more than tactics. It was about honor, honoring his father's legacy, his grandfather's trust, and the future of his people. It was a powerful motivation that fueled his determination and solidified his courage for the battle to come. After 2 days of brutal travel, they looked down upon the East Pass. The sight stole the breath from their lungs. A vast sea of enemy tents and siege engines sprawled below, a city of darkness and fire. At its center stood a grotesque standard, marking the command tent of the Scourge warlord. The scale of the force was overwhelming. Their dozen against an army. A young warrior next to Daniel, named Finn, let out a shaky breath. "It's impossible," he whispered, his face pale in the dim light. The obstacle before them seemed insurmountable, a tidal wave they were expected to stop with their bare hands. Daniel placed a firm hand on Finn's shoulder. "We are not here to defeat them all," he said, his voice low but steady, projecting a mindset of focused purpose. "We are here to make them believe they are defeated. We are here to cut the head from the snake." He gathered his team, his eyes meeting each of theirs. He spoke not of certain victory, but of necessity. He spoke of their families, their home, and the sacrifice that would give them a chance. It was a speech not of a commander to his soldiers, but of a brother to his kin. He forged their individual bravery into a single, unbreakable weapon of collective courage. Their personal growth was complete. They were no longer just warriors, but instruments of salvation. The plan was swift and brutal. They would use the mountain itself as a weapon. While half the team created a diversion by setting fire to the supply tents on the camp's edge, Daniel, Bryn, and Finn would infiltrate the center to target the command structure. Chaos erupted as flames licked at the night sky. Alarms blared, and soldiers scrambled in confusion. Seizing the moment, Daniel's trio moved like shadows through the camp, their goal in sight. This was the culmination of their adventure, a desperate gamble played on the grandest stage. They reached the command tent. Inside, they could see the hulking form of the warlord, surrounded by his captains. The battle was upon them. With a shared nod, they burst in. What followed was a whirlwind of violence and steel. Bryn fell, taking a fatal blow meant for Finn. Enraged, Finn fought with a ferocity born of grief. Daniel found himself face to face with the warlord. This was the final conflict, a test of all his training, his strength, and his determination. He fought not for revenge, but for the legacy of Bryn, for the future of Finn, for the home that awaited them. He fought with the honor of a true warrior, and in that moment, he understood the profound truth of sacrifice. It was not about death, but about life. It was the ultimate act of heroism, giving everything so that others may live. His courage in that tent would become the spark that ignited a legend, a story of resilience and overcoming obstacles that would be told for generations, ensuring his legacy was forever etched into the stone and soul of Durban. The Scourge warlord was a mountain of fused armor and hatred. Each swing of his massive axe meant to cleave Daniel in two. Daniel fought defensively, using his agility and the ancient shield to deflect blows that numbed his entire arm. This was not a duel of skill, but a test of sheer survival. Every clash was a reverberation of the greater conflict outside, a microcosm of his people's struggle. His motivation was no longer an abstract concept. It was the face of Bryn, fallen in the dirt, and the desperate hope of Finn, who was locked in his own struggle nearby. He was fighting for them. With a roar fueled by grief and determination, Daniel saw his opening. As the warlord overextended on a powerful swing, Daniel ducked beneath the blow and drove his sword up, under the rim of the enemy's helmet. The giant staggered, a guttural choke escaping his lips before he crashed to the ground, shaking the very earth. The tent fell silent save for the ragged breaths of the survivors. The head of the snake was severed, but the body was still thrashing. Daniel grabbed the grotesque standard, his voice hoarse but powerful as he yelled to Finn, "Now, we signal the mountain." Their act of ultimate bravery was complete, but their adventure to survive had just begun. Daniel, listening quietly, felt a plan form in his mind, a dangerous, near-suicidal one. "They expect us to hide behind our walls," he said, his voice cutting through the debate. All eyes turned to him. "We must take the fight to them, not the whole host. A small group. We slip out, navigate the serpent's path, and strike at their command in the pass. Create chaos, break their siege before it truly begins." The room fell silent. The serpent's path was a treacherous, near-mythical route, and the mission was a desperate gamble. It was a testament to his emerging leadership that the seasoned warriors considered his words not as the folly of youth, but as the only path to overcoming this obstacle. It was a plan built on bravery and the ultimate sacrifice. Volunteers were called for the desperate mission, and to Daniel S.O., every able-bodied warrior stepped forward. This was the true strength of Durban, not in its stone walls, but in the hearts and fighting like a man possessed at the breach, refusing to yield the ground. "Go! To the keep! Lead them!" Thorn roared at him, his eyes blazing with the fire of final honor. "My place is here, at the wall that has borne my name for a lifetime." Daniel understood. This was Thorn's sacrifice, his final stand to buy his people precious seconds. It was the passing of the torch in the most brutal way imaginable. With a heart tearing in two, Daniel obeyed his chief's last command, rallying the survivors to fall back. The image of his grandfather standing alone against the tide forever burned into his soul. The inner keep was the clan's last redoubt, a fortress within a fortress. Its gates slammed shut, sealing them in with the remnants of their army and all their people. The mood was one of shock and despair. They had lost their chief. They had lost their outer home. The sounds of the Scourge reveling in their victory outside were a constant torment. Daniel, covered in the grime and blood of the fighting, climbed onto a parapet. All eyes turned to him. He was no longer just the chief's grandson. He was the last stone hand, their de facto leader in this darkest hour. He did not offer them empty promises of victory. He spoke the hard truth. "They have our home," he said, his voice carrying over the silent crowd. "But they do not have us. They do not have our will. My grandfather gave his life so that we could live to fight another moment. We will honor that sacrifice. We will make this keep their tomb. Every stone will cost them blood. Every step will be their last." His words were not cheerful. They were a grim vow, a call to embrace a mindset of utter resilience. It was a speech that forged their despair into a final, unbreakable determination. The siege of the keep began. The Scourge, confident in their victory, threw themselves at the ancient walls, but found a people fighting with the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. Daniel orchestrated the defense with a chilling calm, his personal growth culminating in this moment of ultimate pressure. He was everywhere, an inspirational figure of strength amidst the turmoil. But as he looked out at the endless sea of enemies, he knew they could not hold forever. Their food was limited, their arrows were finite. In a quiet moment, an old tale Bryn had told him on the serpent's path surfaced in his memory, a legend of the Sunken Vault, a hidden armory of the first stone hands, buried deep beneath the mountain and lost to time. It was said to hold weapons and a forgotten passage out of the valley. It was a myth, a desperate hope, but it was the only hope they had left. He gathered his most trusted companions, his eyes grim. "Our strength alone is not enough. We need a miracle. We must find the truth in the old stories." The call to a new, even more perilous adventure had been made. Would this quest for a legendary power be their salvation, or their final damnation? The fate of Durban now hinges on a forgotten myth. The ancient weapons of the Sunken Vault are in their hands. A spark of hope has been lit in the deepest dark. But above them, the might of the Scourge still pounds at the gates. The legend was real, but will it be enough? Daniel and his warriors have taken the first step toward becoming legends. But their adventure is far from over. The cost has been high, and the greatest sacrifices are yet to come. What will they find when they return to the surface? Can a handful of relics truly save a kingdom? And what terrible price will victory demand? What did you think of Daniel's impossible choice? Could you have led that mission into the darkness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next in episode 2, The Sunken Vault.